This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
There have been a number of theories about what the Browns could do when it comes to the draft, when it comes to their roster construction in this offseason. So what I want to do is have a little bit of fun with this, and I want to rank these theories in 4 categories, right? There are some theories that I find to be likely, like, hey, this could happen. There's a good chance it could happen. There are some theories I think are a toss-up where, maybe it can happen, maybe it can't. Some I find straight up unlikely, not impossible, but unlikely. And then some I just find dead on arrival, right? Which is, they basically call it what it is. It's BS, more than likely. So let's bring up the overlay and get into it. So the first theory is that the Browns will stay in pick at 2. If you followed this offseason, you know that trading the number 2 overall pick has been a talking point amongst Browns fans for a significant portion of the time that the Browns have had this pick. And even before the Browns have had this pick, people have theorized that the Browns are going to trade back. So where would I rank this one and why? Well, let's do it. I put pick at 2 at likely. I think it's likely. The reason I think it's likely are 2 things. One, all the people who want to trade the pick at 2 have something in common to me. They underestimate the actual desire for teams, or overestimate the actual desire for teams to trade up to 2. I haven't heard a ton of intentions for teams to trade up to 2 that make a ton of sense to me, quite frankly. But the other reason I'm going to put pick at 2 in likely is I think people are also overestimating or undervaluing how much Andrew Berry tends to stay at his picks in the first 2 days of the draft. Now, he's traded back before, right, as part of the Elijah Moore trade. And if it's pre-draft, he might do something with it. But I remember when the Browns had the 10th pick, it was Andrew Berry's first year. A lot of people anticipated the Browns were going to trade back. They didn't. Last year, pick 55, a lot of people anticipated the Browns were going to trade back. They didn't. Greg Newsome pick, a lot of people anticipated the Browns were going to trade back. They didn't. The truth is that because Andrew Berry has this reputation and comes from this background that people heavily associate with analytics, people tend to assume that the Browns are a heavy trade back team in the first 75 picks. That's not really the case. Most of the time when the Browns trade back, it's like the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, right? Or it's a part of a trade to get a player that they value. It's not necessarily because they want to accumulate a ton of picks. You can't confuse the strategy of Andrew Berry, which is very different from the strategy of Sashi Brown. Sashi Brown traded back all the time. He was the king of trade backs. A lot of the Browns GMs, who weren't even analytics-based guys, were the kings of trade backs, right? The Julio Jones trade back, the disaster of a series of trade backs that was the 2014 draft. That was Ray Farmer who did that, who was a football guy, right? Those are the guys who like to trade back a lot. The analytics people, outside like Sashi Brown, a lot of them like the value of just taking the player. I think the Browns are in that camp that they have the number 2 overall pick. It is rare to get the number 2 overall pick, and you shouldn't trade a player that you value at number 2 for a chance to get a bunch of different players that might add up to that guy. If they love Travis, if they love Abdul, or if they love a quarterback, I think they will take that player at 2. And I think there is enough there in this year's draft at the top for the Browns to feel very comfortable taking a player at 2. So I think them picking at 2 is very likely. Let's go on to the next one. Take a quarterback at 2. If you watch me, this should be no surprise. I think this is unlikely. The reason I think taking a quarterback at 2 is unlikely is based off of my personal feelings and my personal evaluation of these quarterbacks. I do not feel like these quarterbacks are worth that high of a draft selection. Now, you might think differently to me. If you do, then you will have this ranking be different in your own mind. But for me, I don't think it's very likely. Cam Ward is the guy that's being pegged as the number 1 overall pick. I don't think as a prospect, Cam Ward really checks all the boxes for a number 1 overall pick at quarterback. But I understand that the quarterback position is a scarce resource. People are desperate. And sometimes, desperate times lead to you compromising on some things that you would want from a quarterback that you would take this early. Even all that, with all that considered, I don't think Cam is worth the number 2 overall pick. Time will tell on if I have the right opinion about that or if other people have the right opinion on that. But I don't think Cam's there. I don't think Cam's a good enough prospect to take it to, especially once you consider his age. And not because he's old and he's going to age fast, but his age as in he should be past some of these points in his development when he's played this much football. Gives me great concern about what's actually changeable for a prospect that you're projecting a lot of change onto. That is why I think it's unlikely. Shedeur Sanders, he's a fine prospect. I think he should be a first-round pick, a late first-round pick, but I don't think early first fits him. He's not the kind of player with the kind of upside that you would want to take up there. I think it's a more clear-cut, traditional scenario with Shedeur, right? Guys like him that tend to drop a lot. Like if there's quarterbacks that fall in the draft, it's usually the guy who fits the profile Shedeur, a productive player who's a tad bit undersized and has a profile that doesn't necessarily match the level of prospect that he is. That tends to make somebody drop in the draft. So I think taking a quarterback at 2 is unlikely. I don't think they're going to do something crazy like take Jalen Milroe at 2. I don't think it's very unlikely. I don't think it's impossible. I think there's a chance. Maybe the Browns are higher on Cam Ward than I am. Maybe the Browns are sold that Shedeur Sanders is the future, and they take him at 2. I wouldn't discount that, but I don't think it's likely. We'll see what happens, though. All right, next scenario, next thing. Trade up from 33. I'll put this one in toss-up. I think it's very possible that the Browns could see themselves trading up from 33. The reason I think it's very possible that the Browns could see themselves trading up from 33 is simple. The Browns need a quarterback, but I think the quarterbacks that are available make a lot more sense if one of them or more of them falls to a certain point in the late first. Now, the Browns own the 33rd pick, which means trading back into the first round is not going to be very expensive for them, right? If you're talking about from picks 26 to 32, the most it's probably going to cost you is a 4th-round pick to move back into the first round. If you're doing a swap from 33 to 32 just to get a 5th-year option on a player, that's going to be even cheaper. Might even just cost you a pick next year. It's very feasible for the Browns to trade up from 33. Again, if they're at a place where they want to get the blue chip player at 2, right? Want to get the Abdul Carter, want to get the Travis Hunter, and then want to take a chance at quarterback with the 33 pick, and they want to get that 5th-year option just in case, then it would make a lot of sense for Andrew Berry to call his twin brother, who works on the team that has the 32nd pick, to pick right in front of him, and work out a pretty friendly deal to get that pick. It'd be a no-brainer for both the Philadelphia Eagles, who Andrew Berry has a great relationship with, and Andrew Berry. The question is, will the scenario rise for the Browns to do this and it makes sense? Who do the Browns value, right? Is it Jackson Dart? Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Shedeur Sanders? Do one of those guys, in Shedeur Sanders' case, does Shedeur fall past a bunch of teams and get to the late 20s? Does Jalen Milroe get drafted earlier than people expect, or Jackson Dart get drafted earlier than people expect? I think if the right player is available, and it doesn't have to be a quarterback, it could be a different player, but if the right player is available, I think it's very possible that the Browns could trade up. The question is, will the scenario arise, which is why this is at a toss-up, because there are 32 other factors that will change what the Cleveland Browns could or could not be doing there. But yes, trading up from 33, I think that's a toss-up. I think it's more likely that they trade up from 33 than they trade the pick at 2, which we're going to get to as well. And I promise you, all of these aren't just draft related. These are just the start. Trade back at 33. The more I think about it, the more I think I have to put this in unlikely. The reason I have to put this in unlikely is because I am more and more convinced that the Browns might take a swing on that second tier of quarterbacks. And if you believe in one of these quarterbacks enough to take in the second round, you really can't take the chance of trading back and seeing if they're there, right? If you value Jalen Milroe with a second round grade and he's there in the second round, or a late first grade and he's there in the second round, why play with it, right? Just take the guy that's there. And get your guy. Why take the chance of it so you can add some late round picks that may or may not make your roster? I think it makes not enough sense for the Cleveland Browns to do. The one thing about Andrew Berry, he is somebody who has demonstrated that he has patterns that he follows, and he's a very practical person. And I just don't think it's very practical if you think that there's a quarterback out there that you want at 33 to trade back and hope that they're there. That's more like gambling. That's not very practical. Trade back at 2. I also have to put this one, and I'm starting to get to the point to where I'm going to block my face out. So I'm going to have to make an adjustment here. Let's go ahead and adjust me over. Moving over to this side of the screen, I might have to dart over on the other side too. But trade back at 2. I don't think trading back at 2 is very likely. There are 2 reasons. One, I don't think there's a great reason for the Browns to do it. And 2, I think there's even less reasons for a team to trade up to 2. We are at the point now in this pre-draft thing where the consensus opinion, no matter where your personal boards are, who you personally think is the number 1 quarterback. Again, I am in the minority here who thinks that Shedeur is probably the better prospect than Cam Ward, at least the prospect I would prefer. All of that being considered, it seems like the NFL draft community has settled on like Cam Ward is the one that they're going to let go in the top 10. And Shedeur is very much a toss-up, whether he goes in the top 10 or not. That's not a player who's going to drive a very strong trade market. I've always felt like the common logic for a lot of the Browns fans who have pushed for trading the number 2 overall pick has been a bit of an oxymoron, because on one hand, we're saying that the justification for another team to trade up with the Cleveland Browns to give them a big package for the number 2 overall pick will be the allure of the quarterback class and getting Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. On the other hand, in the same exact explanation, we're saying the justification for the Browns to trade the number 2 overall pick is because Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward aren't good enough to justify the number 2 overall pick. Which one is it? Right? Like, those 2 things can't coexist. I don't think there's going to be a big, strong market for the number 2 overall pick. And the number 2 overall pick, in order for it to get traded in a draft where there are players you would take at number 2, right? This is not a draft where all the prospects in the top 10 are really top 20 prospects, right? That's happened before. This is a draft class where This is a class where, quite frankly, you have two players that justify the number 2 overall pick above everybody else in Hunter and Carter. What kind of trade package are you going to get from a team that's not looking to trade up for a quarterback that's going to justify trading the number 2 overall pick? It's probably not likely that it happens. I just don't think the market's going to be there for a team to want to trade up in the top 10. There might be a team that loves Travis Hunter, but are they going to give you a second or a future first just to draft them when they can also get Will Johnson by doing nothing? Probably not, right? There might be a team that loves Abdul Carter, but are they going to trade you a second or a future first when they can just draft Shamar Stewart? You see what I mean? The scarcity at the top of this draft is not scarce enough, and the players at the top of this draft are good enough to where those values are never going to match up, in my mind. Or at least it's going to be very unlikely that those values are never going to match up. So that's why I put that at unlikely. Because when you really think about it, right, not just think about it as a Browns fan, what would be great for you, which is a problem with a lot of trades. We tend to only think about it for the team we care about. But think about this from the other team's perspective and the other team's motivations to do it. Doesn't make much sense. That's where it all falls apart for me. I'm sure a lot of people would like if the Browns could get an amazing pick return for number 2 and only slide back to 4, but that's just not realistic. It's very unlikely to happen. Let's go to this Dak trade and put that Dak trade in DOA. This thing never existed. It's not going to happen. I saw Bruce Drennan double down on it earlier today. Interesting choice. Look, I'd be surprised if this Dak trade ever manifests, but if financially it's not really possible, the Cowboys would be like $140 million in dead cap just to trade Dak Prescott alone. And then, like, we're talking about sending them Greg Newsome too, which is an extra $13 million that the Cowboys have to eat. And then you have to figure out how you're going to replace your quarterback. Now, they did trade for Joe Milton. They traded a 5th-round pick for Joe Milton. But I highly doubt that the Cowboys' plan is to trade their franchise quarterback to start Joe Milton, who, let's face it, is getting a lot of love for a game that you can essentially call the closest thing you can get to a preseason game in the regular season. That's like the one good game that Joe Milton has had. It seems like it's DOA. Dead on arrival. Don't think this was ever really going to go down. The justification, the only thing that people seem to glom onto to think that this could happen is like, well, why did Miles resign if he knew that the Browns weren't going to immediately make a move at quarterback? And the truth is, Miles probably resigned because he took a look at his options and realized, well, resigning was his best option. Get the no trade clause, re-sign. That is his best tactical option. If he wants to try this again in a couple of years, he might have more leverage. But right now, it just wasn't going to happen. I think that's the simple math there. I don't think they said anything to entice him to sign. Reality just struck in with Miles at that point. So, yeah, the Dak trade feels dead on arrival. I hate to do this to you, Brandon Ayuk trade, but I'm going to put you in unlikely. If there was some smoke for a little bit here that this Ayuk trade could happen, but it is very unlikely at this point to me. Not only has the deadline passed, I just don't think the 49ers really want to pull the trigger on it the same year that they trade Debo, right? The 49ers seem to have what I would call cold feet about going into this Brock Purdy era and paying Brock Purdy, because there's been more noise about potentially not paying him than you would expect for a quarterback that's made his multiple Pro Bowls, right, in Brock Purdy. But I think eventually they're going to have to just do what they want to do, what everybody expects them to do, and pay Brock Purdy. I think this whole Ayuk thing is part of that, and let's be honest, if you're going to stick with Brock Purdy, you need to keep a dude like Ayuk and give him one more year after that ACL injury before you really decide to make a move there. The return wasn't going to be good enough to justify it. It is what it is, right? I think they're going to stick with him in San Francisco. I would love to be proven wrong on this because I think Brandon Ayuk could be a spectacular player for the Cleveland Browns, but it's looking very unlikely here. Kirk Cousins in Cleveland. This is looking likely. This has been out there as a suggestion for a very long time. We've all known that once Deshaun popped his Achilles, especially once he did it the second time, and once Kirk got benched in Atlanta, that there was a strong chance that there would be a meeting of worlds between Kirk Cousins and Kevin Stefanski once again in the city of Cleveland. Right now, the Browns only have Kenny Pickett on the roster at quarterback. They need somebody to start. Kirk Cousins, say what you want about him, he can start. Now, would he be a fantastic starter? No. But would he be a significant upgrade from what the Browns had at quarterback last year? Yes. Would he be such an upgrade that the Browns could possibly go over 500, possibly make the playoffs with him? I wouldn't rule that out. And if you're the Browns and that quarterback play is on the table and you're staring at Kenny Pickett, how do you turn your nose up to that? I don't see a way you can. But these are my ranking of the current rumors out there about what the Cleveland Browns could or could not do going forward. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.